All right, we're back every Monday. We're going to be back doing this every Monday for our people. August 10th, 2020. I'm your host, Andre L. Smith, Dre Smith, Smitty Bonton. Let's see, we're here talking about for our people. We're talking that black stuff. We're talking black books. Right? Every week we talk about the new black books that are coming out from academics, from scholars all across the country, and bringing it to those of you out there who want something deeper than what you typically see on social media. So that's what we're doing here with For Our People. We're honoring uh, shows like Tony Brown's Journal, Lister Velt Middleton's For the People, all those who brought scholarship and scholars and academics and black intelligence to the people. So that's what we're going to do here Monday, 11 o'clock, Afro-Atlantic and Jurisprudence on YouTube. I want to, let me also make sure we say every week that many of you may know that we've done this out of Hakim's bookstore. So let me rep for them. If you have the opportunity, we want to save all the black bookstores. So if you have a chance, I want you to hit GoFundMe.com/ Hakim's Bookstore. Donate what you can. We're going to do whatever we can to save black bookstores, black schools, black museums. Right, we're thankful for that wonderful gift of 10 or 20 million dollars that is going to Hampton, Howard, Tuskegee from the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos. Forgive me for not remembering Mackenzie Scott. I'm sorry, Miss Mackenzie Scott, the philanthropist. But that does not negate our responsibility to support black institutions ourselves, right? We're going to better educate ourselves and our children. We're going to start and patronize black institutions, and we're going to stop unduly criticizing each other. And that way we can accumulate human, social, political, and financial capital towards our liberation. All right. So again, we're here talking that black stuff, right, for our people. I'm your host, Smitty Bonton. Again, we're repping for Hakim's Bookstore, right? 210 South 52nd Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Hit them up at Hakim'sBookstore.com. They're on Instagram. They're on Facebook, right? So that's my home bookstore. Shout out yours in the comments section, right? But what are we talking about today? Today's episode, we're going to talk about racist, anti-racist, or that's the title of this episode. And the reason I want to talk about that, well, you know what? I'm going to talk about it in a second, but we're going to talk about what it means to be a racist, anti-racist, or is there even such thing, right? All right. So before we talk about that, let's talk about a few current events dealing with black books, especially from people that I love. First of all, I put it up there, but I put that up there to say, don't ask me what is the beef between J. Cole and No Name. You know No Name's bookstore. I'm sorry, No Name's book club. On the other hand, you know the rapper J. Cole is one of the more conscious rappers out there, and apparently he has some lyrics out there that people feel refer to No Name in a somewhat derogatory manner, or at least critical manner. So I don't know any more about it than that. I don't know any more about it than that. So unfortunately, I hate that we have to come to this because, again, at the end of my mantra is better educate ourselves and our children, start and patronize black businesses, and stop unduly criticizing each other. Right. So for having black folks that we love and that love us clashing at each other, it's like the families fighting. We don't like that. So hopefully, whatever beef they have can be squashed, or maybe it wasn't even a beef to begin with, and we're just making more out of it than it needs to be. Let's see what else is going on this week before we talk about this week's books. Big time. Cast. The Origin of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. Isabel Wilkerson is the author of The Warmth of Other Suns. She's a Pulitzer Prize winning author. That book won her the Pulitzer Prize. She's a journalist. And she has now come out with a book called Caste, The Origin of Our Discontents, comparing our caste system, the idea that black folks or minority folks are relegated to certain demeaning or low-paying occupations, and that white folks are with the grander occupations reserved for white folks. is part of a caste system, right? And she compares it to the caste systems of India, right, which are also racialized. As talk about, it would take us a long time to talk about the Aryans. There is a such people as the Aryan. If you've heard of the Aryan nation, Aryans were northern folks from basically the eastern side of the Caucasus Mountains. That's where you often get the term Caucasian, the Caucasus Mountains. The eastern side would be Asia. So that's the Caucasian people that came down on horseback after mastering that craft and taking over India as the Indian subcontinent and instilling a caste system that placed themselves at the top and black folks and the darker skinned people and the bottom. Herodotus referred to them as the Eastern Ethiopians, as a matter of fact. So she compares our system, our economic system here in the United States, right? You go into any restaurant and you know who is going to be, not you know, but there is a pretty much, you can pretty much guess who is going to be the bus boys, the cooks, the cleaning personnel versus the waiters, the waitresses, and then we get to the managers and the owners, that you can often guess and be quite right without ever having to step into the building. That's what we're talking about with a caste system. So I believe Oprah's book club has announced that is the book of the week that Oprah is presenting with her book club, is Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. A worthy choice, worthy choice. Before we talk about the books coming in today, let's talk about another controversy regarding black books, and that is the controversy about how to be an anti-racist in white fragility. There are a lot of articles being written right now, after a backlash, I guess you could say, that says you can't read your way out of white supremacy, right? That these training groups, especially now that we had the George Floyd protest, and there's this new movement to work with liberal or progressive white folks to understand their racism and combat it. Now, we could ignore it all or discount it as election year politics in 2020. Or we may acknowledge that something profound may be happening, spurred by the video of the George Floyd killing, right? Because that was so graphic that it just couldn't be denied. So we have white folks trying to figure out how to undo racism in their own personal or implicit biases. So there are authors that have books out already in anticipation of this, who are becoming extremely popular. Of course, the two main ones are Ibram Kendi, the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, and also Robin DiAngelo, a white professor who wrote White Fragility. And the criticism is that they're making too much money right now. I am not, that's not a criticism that I would lay on them. If their books have come out at a time when that just happens to coincide with these protest movements, and therefore they become at the forefront of these diversity and inclusion programs, well, who else is going to do it? And so I don't have a beef with that. I'm not a fan of diversity inclusion programs, but if you are, then I'm not certain why DiAngelo and Kendi are the ones that would be attacked or sullied as far as supplying the text and the speeches. And for that, I understand them making $1 million, but this idea that you have to be a poor righteous teacher to be involved in liberation or the progressive movement makes no sense to me. That we're supposed to liberate ourselves with less instead of more, and isn't part of liberation gaining income? So that's where me and the progressive movement, I'm a little uneasy with some of those tactics. Now, I will say this though, I am a black nationalist, so when it comes to when I am thinking of the racist, anti-racist, I'm not thinking of these authors promoting books, selling a dream, and then actually supporting white supremacy. I'm actually concerned about Brother Kendi or Professor Kendi's reinvigoration, and I had a conversation with the great Dr. Carol Boyce Davies about this, about him reinvigorating the idea of Black folks who fight racism being racist. So, and most specifically, his disregard for Francis Cress Welsing and the ISIS Papers. His book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, is absolutely derived from the. Matter of fact, I'm going to get it. How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi is derived from this book, 1971, United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, a textbook workbook for thought, speech, and action for victims of racism and white supremacy. It is authored by Neely Fuller. Neely Fuller is an independent author. He's not a professor. He published this book and delivered it to Black bookstores all around the country for the last 30, 40 years. I'm not saying that Ibram Kendi did it entirely. He has his own thoughts on how to be an anti-racist. However, this is a workbook on how to fight white supremacy, and it is clearly where he got the idea. As a matter of fact, when he references Francis Cress Welsing, you'll note that if you've read the ISIS Papers, Francis Cress Welsing also cites Neely Fuller for the proposition that racism equals white supremacy in education, entertainment, economics, labor, law, politics, sex, religion, and war. That it is the job of non-white people. He never says Black. He says for non-white people to fight white supremacy in all of those areas of human activity, in education, entertainment, economics, labor, law, politics, sex, religion, war, right? So this is the original. This is the original How to Be an Anti-Racist, How to Be an Anti-White Supremacist. So I hope that Neely Fuller Jr., I hope Francis Cress Welsing, I hope they get their due as far as fighting, identifying white supremacy and fighting it from the beginning. All right, so I'm off my soapbox with that, right? And so let's talk about the books for this week. As always, most of these books come from the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education.com. Shout out to jbhe.com, right? They have put out a weekly book list, and I love to support them on this. And so I'd like to talk about, or at least present those ones they presented. And if there's any ones that are really interesting to me, I just try to identify that. So the first one, the first book out this week, the Edward Wimberly Reader, A Black Pastoral Theology, edited by Mary Clark Moschella and Lee H. Butler, published out of Baylor University Press. Right, the Edward Wimberly Reader, A Black Pastoral Theology. That is not really up my lane too much, but it is. But what I find interesting is as a lawyer, and especially one that's interested in jurisprudence. I have a book coming out pretty soon called Afro-Atlantic in Jurisprudence. It's always interesting to me about divinity and the interpretation of religious texts in comparison to the interpretation of legal texts. Right? There's a similarity, there's an analogy, there's a symmetry there. So even though those things aren't books on religion or religious figures are not necessarily on the top of my priority list, I do appreciate the endeavor, the skill for the problematics for those who think deeply about how to teach a text, whether it be a testament, a Bible, or a law or constitution. Another book that came out this week, Reclaiming Greek Drama for Diverse Audience, an anthology of adaptations, interviews edited by Melinda Powers. This is published by Routledge Books. This is very important, right? It took me a long time to read Herodotus, and I'm so thankful that I did, because Black folks are mentioned throughout Herodotus. I'm not a fan. I didn't want to go see 300, the movie 300, the Achilles, the Greek gods. A lot of us reject the inculcation to Eurocentric values through their history and gods. However, we have to also recognize, or we don't have to, but we can recognize that those works were produced in an era that held Black folks in Africa in fairly high esteem. And therefore, the references in there, if we look closely enough, are pretty flattering. And it is where we can, and the works of Herodotus, the works of Strabo, the works of Diodorus Siculus are where Sheikh Antioch, where David Walker, where classic Black authors and historians found the evidence of Black Egypt, of the greatness of pre-colonial Africa, of the greatness of the Ethiopians, right? As distinct from the Egyptians, right? And two sets of Ethiopians, right? So this is an interesting book. This one's a little higher on my priority list, Reclaiming Greek Drama for Diverse Audiences, an anthology of adaptations and interviews. I think that's a noble effort. I still think we need to produce our own stories about Egyptian drama, about Ethiopian drama. I'm writing another book after this one talking about the Zanj, East African folks, all the way down to the Zambezi River with the gold mines of Sofala and the cities of Malindi, Malabar, Kilwa, Zanzibar. You've heard of Zanzibar. And so there's a whole history there where we need to know the gods, the drama, the tribulations, the kings, the queens, right? We can, so as much as we may preserve the Greek dramas, as much as we may appreciate good literature wherever we might find it around the world, we need to always, again, elevate and privilege that which honors us directly. All right, the last book that we're going to talk about this week, this one's the doozy. This one's the big one. This one's the one I might have to have on my shelf. Human Contradictions in Octavia E. Butler's work, edited by Martin Japtok and Jerry Rafiki Jenkins. This one is published out of Palgrave Macmillan. Palgrave Macmillan is publishing a lot of books that are, on the one hand, somewhat popular, but at the same time scholarly, right? They're teetering right along that edge. Palgrave Macmillan, I'm not mad at y'all. Right, so Human Contradictions in Octavia E. Butler's work. Let me read you a blurb from it, because for those that don't know, Octavia Butler is my #1 favorite author. Shout out to Walter Mosley, shout out to Richard Wright, shout out to Charles Johnson, shout out to Alice Walker, shout out to Toni Morrison, shout out to Tanana Reed Way, shout out to all these great writers, but Octavia Butler for me is #1. Right? I read Parable of the Sower. I had to get everything else she ever wrote. So I'm very pleased that there are now several scholarly reflections on her work. As a matter of fact, about 5 years ago, a book came out called Octavia's Brood, Science Fiction Stories for Social Justice Movements in 2015. That was by Walida Imarisha, Adrienne Marie Brown, Sheree Renee Thomas. So keep them coming, keep them coming. This one is by Martin Japtok, or edited by Martin Japtok and Jerry Rafiki Jenkins. Here's a little excerpt or blurb or description. Human Contradictions in Octavia Butler's work continues the critical discussions of Butler's work by offering a variety of theoretical perspectives and approaches to her text. This collection contains original essays that engage Butler's series Seed to Harvest, Exogenesis, and the Parables. Right? You remember Earth Seed as far as the parables. You remember Exogenesis series, right? Imago and all that. How about the Pattern Master series? Her standalone novels, Kindred and Fledgling. Let me tell you, Fledgling is so ill. I know a lot of you read Kindred in your African American Studies programs. I know a lot of people have. That's where they know Octavia Butler from. But her last work that she published before she died, Fledgling, woo-wee. If any book, I mean, all of her books should be movies, but Fledgling, come on now. It puts a new spin on Blackula. As a matter of fact, I hate to sully the term, but they need to take her book, Fledgling, and do Blackula for 2020s, right? Flip the whole story, make it real ill from the story that she presents in Fledgling, because it is a powerhouse. The essays explore her new facets of Butler's work and its relevance to philosophy, sociology, anthropology, psychology, cultural studies, ethnic studies, women's studies, religious studies, American studies, and U.S. history. And they left out law. You know, there's a trial in Fledgling. They left out law. I can talk about the laws of her Earthseed community. Oh man, her books are just too deep. This volume establishes new ways of reading the seminal figure in African American literature, science fiction, feminism, and popular culture. I do not consider myself a feminist. I know some men consider themselves feminists. I do not. I think I support women as best I can. But at the same time, I'm a man and I like my maleness as well. So I try to temper it when I believe it impinges upon others. And I like to celebrate difference, and I celebrate women, Black women specifically. And one of the ways I can do that is just appreciate the things that y'all produce. And to be in as non-gendered a way as possible. Octavia's Butler's book, Parable of the Sower, for me is genderless. But I also appreciate to women the strength of her character, and I'd love to talk about the fact that if I recall correctly from the book, I read it back in the '90s. It's so impressionable on me. I feel like I read it like 2 years ago when it's actually been over 20. But I want to say that she does not even reveal that the main character is a Black woman for pages and pages, maybe even the whole chapter. I'm not even sure. Right? That she is Black. She is a Black woman, and yet it's not central to her character, though it's still clear and unmistaken. Octavia Butler is the sure shot. So we're going to end this talk on, yes, get her books: Adulthood Rights, Imago, Pattern Master Series, Parable of the Sower, Parable of the Talents. I had heard that she was going to do a third book called Parable of the Trickster. I heard that she was in the midst of that when she passed. The word on the street was that Tananarive Due was going to finish the book off, just like Tananarive Due finished off The Black Rose for Alex Haley. But I happened to actually get in touch with Tananarive Due, and she says no, she had not heard that rumor, so I guess it's not true. Well, I hope by bringing that rumor to her helped maybe inspire her to contact her agent and then make a call and see what happens. Anyway, Tananarive Due, author of The First Blood, author of Black Rose, other great Black books and whatnot for the people. So those are the 3 books that we have presented for today. That was presented to us by the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education, the Edward Wimberly Reader, A Black Pastoral Theology, Reclaiming Greek Drama for Diverse Audiences. I'm interested in what they got to say about that one. And then the doozy, Human Contradictions in Octavia Butler's work, edited by Martin Japtok and Jerry Rafiki Jenkins. Also, do not forget, the book came out. It is, I know you can't forget because it's on Oprah's Book Club, but know that I endorse it, and I need, and tell me about it if you can. Anybody in the sound of my voice that knows me, please reach out and let me know how you feel about Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. And you also mentioned that Africans, Black folks, we held caste systems in Africa pre-colonial. They may have been different in structure, but we cannot ignore just because we want to put the blame and put justice claims on others. They are valid, and at the same time, we need to be thorough and honest about where we came from, and that we also had caste systems. We also had enslavement and all that. We were fully human. I argue that pre-colonial Africa had a greater commitment to equal protection as far as group subordination than any other place in the world, and that does not mean it was utopia. That does not mean it was sinless, right? So we need to take those lessons from the past, bring them forward, and if we're going to liberate ourselves out of the system of white supremacy, if we're going to liberate ourselves into self-sufficiency, we are going to have to better educate ourselves and our children, start and patronize Black businesses and institutions, stop unduly criticizing each other. We're going to have to accumulate human, social, political, financial capital. That is the revolution that will never be televised. See you next week. For our people, I'm Trey Smith, Smitty Bonton. Talk to you again. Hotep.